Hello, thank you for joining us. This is Barbara Kraft, Director of Admissions for Wharton, San Francisco, the East Coast team out there as well. We'll be starting the webinar in just a few moments. Please bear with us. It's my dog. Hello, everyone. This is Barbara Kraft, Director of Admissions for Wharton, San Francisco. Thank you for joining us today. We have with us as well the East Coast team out there. We're excited to present to you on sponsorship letters and letters of recommendation and take any questions you may have.
Hi, this is Diane Sharp. I'm the Director of the Admissions for the Philadelphia side of things for the Wharton MBA program for executives. And with me here is Alicia Rogers, and she is the one who will be taking your questions and getting them to Barb and me. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so let's kick it off by saying, why does Wharton require both letter of sponsorship and 2 letters of recommendation? Basically, we want to know as much about you as we can. The application, once you get into it, you'll see it's very holistic. Just like any other required piece of the application, the essays, the interview, and all that, it's a different perspective on you. So these 2 items really add a different voice, a different aspect of what you're bringing to the program. When we really feel strongly that your app wouldn't be complete if we didn't have these 2 types of letters, and then we'll get into what is involved in each of these types of letters now.
So what is the difference between a sponsorship letter and a letter of recommendation? We often get a lot of confusion between these 2. So this is one of the reasons we wanted to have this webinar, was to really clarify the large difference between a sponsorship letter and a letter of recommendation. The sponsorship letter is a letter from your employer. It could be someone from HR, it could be a manager. It's the person who can address the time commitment involved with the program, and also if you'll be receiving any type of financial support, the sponsorship letter would include that as well. A letter of recommendation, on the other hand, is from an immediate supervisor, someone who works closely with you. That's the person who really can speak to your skills, your abilities, your managerial style, and be able to provide specific explanations or examples about your work.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. And please don't forget, you can ask your questions along the way. The sponsorship letter. This is one of only 2 documents we need a hard copy of, the transcripts being the other document. So we need whoever has the authority, as Barb said, to sign off on you participating in the program, letter signed by that person. And it could be one of many people. It's different for each company. So you can upload a soft copy of that into your application, but the hard copy does need to be sent to either San Francisco or Philadelphia, wherever you're applying. We do not have a template. We get often asked, is there a template for the sponsorship letter? And we don't, for the reason that we see so many different types of companies applying here, people who might even be entrepreneurial, they have their own company, they might work for a Fortune 500 company, everything in between. So we don't want to squeeze everybody into the same format for sponsorship, because we feel this is a conversation that you need to have early on with your management to get their buy-in. So whatever you and your company agree on, that's what we want to see. But as Barb mentioned on the outset, there are 3 basic things we need to see in there. And it doesn't have to be a long letter. Usually 1 page is fine. First and foremost, everybody who applies needs that time. They have to say, we know he or she's applying, and we will make sure the calendar is clear so they can be in San Francisco or Philadelphia when the calendar requires it. So that's the minimum for everybody. Then there's the financial piece. Here's hoping that everybody gets 100% sponsorship, but it could be 0, and we see mostly somewhere in between. So whatever you've agreed on with your company, is it the standard benefit that your company gives, if it's full sponsorship, if it's reimbursement, they just need to state that to us. It could be a dollar amount or percentage, anything from 0 to 100. And then the last thing, I call it the spirit of the letter. And that just says, this is great. We're glad he or she's applying, and we want this to happen. So again, it's different from a rec, and Barb will get into the recs. And we have a question.
I have a question here regarding being self-employed. Do I need a sponsorship letter?
Yes, good, great. I'm glad you asked, and we're seeing more and more of these. So yes, you would provide a letter of self-sponsorship. Basically, you're signing your own letter. It needs to be on your company letterhead. And you're going to say, I know what I'm getting into. Basically, you're going to say, my company will outlast the 2 years that I'm going to be in the program. So you just have to kind of acknowledge that you can handle running your own company and doing this program. So yes, the letter still needs to be there, but you sign your own. Thanks. All right.
So with respect to the letters of recommendation, this is something we encourage you to start thinking about early on in the admissions process, is identifying those people who will write your letter of recommendation. Our application deadlines are December the 5th and February the 6th, so they fall right around the holidays. And letters of recommendation are one thing that are somewhat out of your control as far as when that person gets that letter back to us. So think early about that, identify the person early so that you have ample time to receive that letter, those letters in time for the deadline. So with the letters of recommendation, those are sent electronically through our application system whenever you input the recommender's name and contact information. So when you identify who it is that's writing your letter of recommendation, you'll enter that information into your application, and the recommender will receive an email with a link to a recommendation form. So unlike the sponsorship letter where there's no form, there is a form for the letters of recommendation. Now, recommendation letters should come from, again, employers, supervisors, and those who can provide insight into your professional, performance. Please, no former college professors or teachers, friends, or relatives.
All right, so how are these letters used? They are used differently, and as we stated at the outset, it just provides a bigger picture. The letter of sponsorship is required in order to get a decision. A lot of times people will say, can I find out my decision first and then get sponsorship? But no, we use it to make sure that your company understands what they're going to get out of the program. They have to have some skin in the game, so to speak, because they're going to benefit from it. So it's used just to make sure you have the buy-in, and people shouldn't be concerned if they're not getting any money from their company and how it reflects on them. We understand some companies have these policies, some don't. It's that spiritual buy-in is just as important. And the letters of recommendation, they are used as you would expect. We want to know what other people value in you, why they're going to bat for you. It really is something that shows that you would be a good fit here. The students here work so closely together. They build such strong bonds. These letters of rec should reflect that that's something that you're already adept at doing, that people would enjoy being around you for a couple of years, to put it bluntly. So that's why Barb mentioned, think well on who you want. It doesn't, the fancy title doesn't matter. It should be someone who's going to go to bat for you and values you as a colleague. So it really does just really provide that 360 view of you and your app, because these are the things that are somewhat out of your control, right? You pick who writes them, but you're not writing it like the essays, and you're not in the interview. So it's good to have those other voices in your application. All right, so that's pretty much our what we wanted to cover, two very basic but important parts of the application. So hopefully we've got some questions coming, and we're going to stay online for a while if we don't get to your question. So we'll make sure that we answer it online, and we'll be sending a recording to everyone who's registered, so you would see the answers there. But Alicia, do we have anybody asking a question?
Yes, back to sponsorship letter. If you have ownership in the company, do you prefer sponsorship letter from CEO or management in general?
I would say CEO. I think it would be important to have the CEO's perspective, especially if you have ownership in the company. It would be really helpful to have that input. Again, and that's where they would address the time commitment and their comfort with you being involved in this program, as well as if the company will be providing any financial support.
Great. How many letters of recommendation should we provide?
We require 2. You'll see the system does have 2 opportunities to provide the name and email address of 2 different people. So the minimum is 2, and really that should be the maximum. Some people will ask, oh, can I provide someone else? So they would have to write a letter or send an email or something like that, because the system wouldn't take it. But we also feel that that shouldn't be necessary unless this is a person that's going to add a completely new viewpoint to your application. Because remember, you've got a committee of people who are doing a lot of reading, so try to just maximize those 2 opportunities.
On the recommendation letter, how recent should the relationship of the recommender with me be? Would a supervisor who saw my career potential early in my career be a good pick, or would this be considered outdated?
Well, I would say that would depend on how long ago that was. But in particular, we like to see current information throughout your application process as possible. So I did get a question the other day. Someone asked me, they're in a fairly new role with a new manager, and they asked, should I get a letter of recommendation from that person, or should I get a letter of recommendation from my former manager that I worked with for a number of years? In that particular case, I'd say the former manager that worked with you a number of years and has some real track record of your performance, but also the new manager as well. So you could do 2 in that case, the older manager, the newer manager, but really it needs to be as current as possible and someone who knows you well.
And one more question here. Is there a recommendation form that they'll see it like ahead of time?
That form is within the application, so the applicant doesn't see it. It's pretty standard. We ask your strengths and weaknesses, and basically what you bring to the team and how the person knows you.
And I just want to add that some recommenders decide, in addition to the form, to attach a letter along with the form, and that's absolutely acceptable.
Yeah, good point. There is an upload function as well. So definitely let them know, because oftentimes a recommender will have a letter ready to go, but we would like them to complete the form as well. Jar to memory as well, I had an individual ask about the sponsorship as they were going through the process to get buy-in from their company, what they needed to provide as far as details in the letter of sponsorship of what the agreement was, basically. So some companies are going to require you to sign something from your legal department, perhaps, and some it's going to be a handshake to say, yes, we're sponsoring you, and here's what we're going to give you. We really don't have to see things like, well, I will be working for 2 years with the company after I graduate, or if I leave early, I have to pay 50% back. All those kinds of details, the agreement that you have with your company on what it means for them to sponsor you, we do not need to see. We just need to know what that sponsorship involves. Let's see if we have any more questions. Again, we're not going to, Barb and I will pop off in a moment here, but we'll stay on until we get all your questions answered via the module, in the chat module here in the webinar. So, and again, we're going to be just answering the sponsorship and recommendation related questions. If you have others, you will see links to send you right to those topics. And you're also going to see at the end of this presentation the opportunity to sign up for a chat where Barb and I and other members of the admissions team can talk with you one-on-one. All right, so that looks to be all of our questions for now. You'll want to join us for our next webinar. We're going to try to do these monthly, but as you can see, we'd love for you to schedule a chat so you can get more specific questions answered.
Yes, we have a team in Philadelphia and a team in San Francisco that is readily accessible to you. If you have any questions along the way, you want to talk about your candidacy, we're out here, so do schedule that chat time. As a reminder, our application deadlines are December the 5th and February the 6th for our class that'll start in May 2019. Thank you all very much.